This is the Cricket Matters podcast. If you're new to the show, it's great to have you here. If you haven't yet subscribed and reviewed, please do so. We'd really appreciate your feedback and comments. And if you've got any suggestions for future episodes, please drop us a message. With me, as always, is my co-host, James Breeze. James, how are you?
I'm very well. Congrats, Chops. I've lost my voice now as well. you took 3 goes at the intro, and I almost lost my voice in the first effort.
Yeah,
so
brilliant.
Fantastic.
It's going well today.
Fantastic.
It's going really, really well.
Happy Friday.
Indeed. End of the week. We'll blame the fact that it's the end of the week on this. Right, yes, welcome to the Cricket Matters podcast. Thank you for tuning in, guys. We'll crack straight on with the show and talk why hiking is great pre-season fitness for cricketers. Because would you agree, James, that that's probably the first time cricketers have ever heard that?
Probably. I'm not quite sure. But we'll try and get through. By the end of this episode, you'll see why we think it's such an important aspect to your game in terms of not just fitness, but in terms of your ability to perform better at the skills you're doing too. And it's something from personal experience I discovered when I was skiing and snowboarding and doing a lot of backcountry mounting stuff, and just learning secrets from other sports that we got to think about and bring it into the game of cricket. Like I said, I've come back into cricket after a bit of a hiatus, having worked with a lot of endurance things in terms of military, police, and endurance sports. And cricket is essentially an endurance sport. Yes, it's got a mixture of everything else into it. But what other sport do you know that goes on for 5 days straight if you're at test level? And for most amateur cricketers who are playing Saturday League cricket, you're talking an all-day event, anywhere between 6 to 8 hours, unless you get bowled out early for like 10, which happened once last season for us. But it's one of those things, you've got to treat cricket as an endurance sport, which means you've got... there's elements of sprinting, anaerobic work, and being high intensity. Yes, I get that. But the problem we see with a lot of people is they focus on the small minutiae of things. And maybe that comes from all the strength coaches and like myself and other people who put all the emphasis on the gym work. I'm not saying that's not important, but it also makes the strength coaches feel important and gives us something to do and a reason for being, to get people into the gym. Whereas today I'm going to talk about hiking, where it doesn't need us to be around them, but I think it's one of the most important things to carry over to your game.
Well, as you
say,
and as you said at the start of that, we like to look at other sports and what other sports do, and basically we like to look at what the best do. And I'm not just talking about cricket here now, I'm talking about sport in general, the best, things like CrossFit, all sorts of stuff, endurance runners and everything, and sort of reverse engineer what they do and try and apply it to other people, apply it to cricketers, apply it to just everyday athletes, etc., etc. So let's talk about what was it. Go back to St Anton skiing. What was it what was the lesson that you learnt there?
So again, it was one of those things. So one of my biggest passions is snowboarding in the backcountry. I was a guide for many years living out in Austria, and I used to just do snowboard. I used to snowboard 6-7 days a week, take guests all over the mountain and come back. And again, life got in the way. Similar with my cricket. I stopped going at the same time. But I was lucky enough to go live out in Austria again to do this after a period away. And the first thing I realised is my endurance wasn't there for the mountains. I wasn't mountain fit, and that is a big distinction.
And what I just mountain fit.
Yes, strong. I could do the rowing, whatever it was, but I was working on pieces that were lasting no more than 10 minutes at a time, and it was like, well, hang on a second, I'm snowboarding the whole day. Right, similar to cricket. Like I want to go up and down, do as many trails as possible on my snowboard, but also I'm hiking back country, which means I'm going through chest height powder to get to certain areas, to drop off a cliff and do that type of stuff. And my endurance wasn't there. It was a big wake up call. Now we can compare that to cricket. Cricket is a 6 to 8 hour game, essentially on a Saturday if you're playing league cricket, 5 days if you're playing test. You've got to see that as an endurance, your ability to endure for those periods of time, first and foremost. And yes, you've got to do the anaerobic stuff and sprints and recover fast, but we've got to prepare you for this. Working in the gym for 20, 30 minutes will not prepare you properly for a game of cricket.
Because how often are you on your feet?
That's the biggest way.
6 to 8 hours. how much do you practice for that? If you're just,
All
as
day.
you say, if you're just going in the gym for 45 minutes an hour, that's not going to prep you for being on your feet, doing sprints, shuttles, etc., and recovering for 6 to 8 hours, is it?
Nope. No, absolutely not. And that's the biggest thing. You're training for a shorter piece when the game's going to be lasting longer. Now, I can also compare this to a batsman in the nets, and this is a big thing I see time and time again across the board. At net sessions, batsmen will go in and they'll have their 10, 15 minutes slot in the net, which I understand has constraints in the group. When you got a group of people in a couple of lanes happening here now, it's hard to get anything more than that. However, if you're a top 5 batsman, particularly top 3, your job is to bat for as long as possible. If you're just practicing in the nets for 10 to 15 minutes, you're just training yourself to bat for 10 to 15 minutes, okay? So, and this comes along from, I remember this quote from Michael Clark, I don't know where, for the ex-Aussie captain. I remember he wasn't getting many runs, or I read somewhere he wasn't getting many runs. So he changed from having a half-hour, 45-minute net sessions to having 4 5-hour net sessions on a go to prepare himself for the game that is Test cricket and batting for longer periods. And suddenly he had hundreds, double hundreds coming for fun because he changed the way he was training. You need to do that type of specific training and skill sessions if you can, right? I know it's not always practical, but you've got to compare everything. Your batting, your bowling, your fielding, put it all together.
I just
on
say
your feet
that
for 8 hours a day.
That batting.
And you're covering
what was the name of the
lot
Australian
distance.
batsman? Michael Clark. Yes, that's one I
Michael
know.
Clark.
That's good, isn't it? As you say, for most cricketers, though, doing 4 or 5 hours in the nets is not going to be possible. But at least you want to try and increase your time as much as you can. So if you can do an hour, then you're already at an advantage. Quick question before we get into the hiking, though. How much does grip strength come into it in endurance? Because if you're batting in the field for 5 hours, you got to hold on to that bat, right?
Exactly, everything. It is important. It's absolutely important to be able to hold on to, and grip and forearm strength. If you're thinking about it and playing the shots, a lot of people get tight forearms as well from playing. So it is a big factor. As Greg from Cardiff Cricket Club will testify after doing his bar.
He needs to get doing some long loaded carries.
Really important. But actually, speaking of Greg. He does indeed. He's got that coming up this week, actually. But no, the other thing Greg mentioned as well, which ties back into this, was he said a comment that Joe Root made after his performance in Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, last year, was that he started running further in his training, and he thinks that's one of the biggest reasons why he went on to score bigger hundreds. And we'll get into that as well. It ties into everything we're talking. Again, if you listen to the previous podcast, we talk about running and what we think about running in terms of 5Ks, 10Ks, and we're not a big fan of doing ultra marathons or marathons to prepare you for cricket. However, I am a massive fan of hiking for multiple hours at a time to build your aerobic base and build your muscular endurance to handle the strains you put on your body for the game of cricket coming into season. Because again, in the first game of the season, you always see it, particularly the older boys in the club, they're stiff and sore for weeks. And it's not always the batting and the bowling. They may have got out for like a duck or whatever it is, right? Maybe bowled a couple of overs. But they've been on their feet all day and they've covered more distance in that first game than they have done in the last, since the last game of last season.
Well, this is what I said to you before we started recording. I put this question out to you and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And we Googled it. I said, well, how much distance then does a fielder generally cover in cricket? And it was quite interesting, right? Because as we say, general club cricketers, they're not going to have covered the kind of distances that they then suddenly do in one day during pre-season or during the previous months, are they? So it's really important to look at what distances are actually covered, and then you've got to try and mimic that as much as possible in your training.
Yep. Exactly. So we've got multiple elements here. So we pull these are GPS stats from the international stars. So again, give or take a couple of K, I think is the best way when we're analysing this now. But what we know is that fast bowlers cover the greatest distance and do the most amount of sprinting in a game. For example, in a one-day international, a fast bowler can cover around 13.5 kilometres. right? Which compares to the same distance as hockey or football or soccer if you're in Australia, right? In terms of size and distance that they're covering. Now, in one-day matches, you then got spin bowlers covering around 11k, wicket-keepers 9.5k, and fielders about 10.8k. Now, when it comes to batsmen, it always varies depending on how long they're at the crease and how long they're batting for. But on average, you're looking 2.6 kilometres per hour for each time they're batting there as well. Then throw in the fielding, then throw in, if they're an all-rounder too, to cover that in. So you're looking anywhere between 10 to 14 kilometres, I think, for overall. Now, we talk about that for running, which is great covering that distance. But we want to get consistent with this, and I don't want to put too much volume on the body and the joints because it's already stressful enough. And this is where it comes into hiking, and particularly hiking on good mountainous terrain to build that muscular endurance up in your legs. You don't need to go to the gym all the time to build up good muscular endurance in your legs.
As you say,
need to find a good mountain
endurance,
and
great
start
for the
hiking
tendons,
up it
the ligaments, the
as best as you
bones,
possibly can.
Just the durability of the body, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And cricket's all about durability. Like, the more durable cricketer over the course of the season will always win because they'll be able to play more games and do more things long term. So it's about that durability and building the volume into your legs. Like in football, for example, you want to increase someone's speed to build up their speed reserve so they're operating below that threshold so they can perform longer and safer. You're not hitting that red line all the time when you're sprinting. It's within those constraints. And it's a safety thing, it's a conditioning thing, everything here. We kind of want to do the same with hiking and covering that distance. We want to get used to covering this volume so the body is adapting to it. And we can learn this from our friends in the endurance world, cross-country skiing, ultramarathons, trail runs, all these things that you've got to do the volume. Like, there's no two ways about it. If to be a good endurance athlete, you're talking 400 to 500 years of endurance work to build the base up. To give you the ability.
400 or 500 years, cricketers?
Years.
To spend on aerobic base.
Hours a year. Exactly. That's a brand new Cricket Matters longevity plan we've just come out with, and we've patented it to increase longevity. But it's we've got to think of it in those terms. So we've got to build volume, and this is where it comes in. So, like pre-season, we've talked about skills-based practice, super important. Strength training, we've touched on a little bit, but running, we think running's a good part of it. Yeah. But I would throw in every weekend, do a long-ass hike. Get a long-ass hike. Like, I'm based in Cardiff. I love being in the mountains anyway. I'm a mountain man at the best of times. So I will be hiking all around Penryn, the Brecon Beacons. I'll be heading up North Wales for more mountainous terrain as well to cover around up there. But people need to do that and not just go for a little 1 hour walk. Like, cricketers, think about hiking 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 hours to mimic that game. So you'll feel less stiff and less sore when it comes to pre-season. To the start of the season. And also, we talk about protecting joints, ligaments, and helping cricketers perform at their best, to do everything right. This is accessible to everybody, right? So, again, I can't comment because I haven't worked at the highest levels with working with pros in terms of cricketers. But in terms of club cricketers, what I'm seeing, and other elite sports I kind of work with, you've got to have this volume and build it up. And you learn this from the secrets of the best endurance athletes in the world. Yeah, I'm not discarding the fast stuff, the sprinting or other stuff. You've got to have that as well, because cricket's a very unique sport. But have that base behind you and that volume to build your legs, build that aerobic capacity, right? Which will then give you
and I'd say it's easy volume as well.
To go
it's
into with the
do harm to the joints. It's only going to do good things for the joints and the muscles, and not only that, for your mental health as well. It's great hiking, getting out there, and
100%. Yep, get out there, get some fresh air. It's a wonderful thing. So many good points to it, but it's something that you've got to consider in building up to the volume. Again, it's something so easy. Like, you just need a pair.
By the way,
shoes,
you said, like,
hiking boots, coat.
Yeah, so you said there, like, go 6 up to 8
doing
hours.
It. And
if you haven't hiked for 6 to 8 hours, don't immediately go and hike for 6 to 8 hours. Maybe start with an hour and then do an hour and a half and 2 hours, etc., etc.
Yeah, exactly.
And build your volume like anything.
Yep.
No.
Yeah, and we're not saying go climb Mount Everest either. That's don't climb Everest on day one. But again, let's use down South Wales as an example. You've Pen y Fan. One of the simplest paths up to Pen y Fan is from the Story Arms. You can walk up it. It's the trail. It's a good trail. It's fantastic. Now, if you want to be more epic, you go on the backside and you can do Crippen, you can do Van der Big, and you can do Pen y Fan all in one loop. And it's a way more terrain based there, and it'll take you longer. Build up to it. An hour, 2 hours, up and down. Cool, yeah. That's a good start. Then if you want to be more adventurous and you've got time, then go further. But just build the volume. If you're time constrained, this is the other thing you can think about, is that if you've only got 1 or 2 hours and you can't do the 6 to 8 hours, if you're a young pup, a young gun, well, you should have time. You got not much else going on in your life. But if you're like an older stalwart to the club, then, okay, well, maybe consider adding a bit of load. Do a bit of what we call rocking or tabbing, like nothing too heavy, 5% body weight. If you want to go crazy, go 10%, but add a little bit of load to build up that resilience for you over that time to help you prepare for the season.
Absolutely.
And
if you haven't got access to a Pen y Fan, there are other areas of the British Isles that do exist. But also, if you've got, say you don't have access to mountains, but you've got a treadmill. It's not ideal. We'd want you to get outside, really, but get on your treadmill, whack up the incline, and go for a walk. It's better than nothing.
Yep. Exactly. That's the point. But there's not lots of options here to train and play around with. Yep. Now again, if you're an advanced runner, then absolutely go for trail run. Like just do some trail running in the mountains if you want to do it. I'm a big fan of trail running in the mountains. I'm not going to do it straight away. I haven't been up for a couple of months, but I'm not going to do that straight away. I'm going to go back into just hiking and moving properly, and then build back into some trail run. Plus, you've also got to factor in the danger factor of it as well. You don't want to roll any ankles while you're in the mountains too. So just bear those in mind. It's safety first. That's why hiking and walking, I think, is a very good system for building up your capacity, because this is how it carries over to cricketing performance. Again, I can relate more to batsmen, and the same in the field as bowlers as well. But if you've got to make good decisions, the more you are blowing out of your arse, right, when you're at the crease, the poorer decisions you're going to make long term. And you've got to make a good decision every single ball that you face. Are you going to leave it? Are you going to play it? Are you going to attack it? Are you going to defend it? You've got to think about all these things. And if you're not fit enough and you haven't got the endurance to survive mentally and physically, then it's going to make it that much harder. And it's why I keep going back to why I think a lot of club cricketers and club batsmen particularly struggle to get past 20s and 30s. It's because they're blowing out their arse a lot of the time, and they can't go on the same way they started off. And that's the biggest gift I can give to you guys. It's about giving you the aerobic fitness and capacity that makes you more resilient.
Absolutely.
And allows you the clarity of thought,
making better decisions,
to help you make
and
better
reactions,
decisions.
right? Because in the field you've got to have great reaction times, and if you're knackered, your reactions are going to be really poor.
Yep, exactly. And again, this comes from, again, I'm going to go back to the military background, the Navy SEALs. The number one predictor of passing the Navy SEALs test is your 5K run time, the 3-mile test. If you can run under there, because it's not about how strong you are, the survival of the fittest. It's about having the clarity of thought to make better decisions with their weapon skills and under pressure. And at cricket, you're under pressure a lot of the time. Particularly if someone's trying to bowl 80 miles an hour and knock your head off, and you just want to 3 off them, and whatever you want to do. Like you've got to think clearly. It's such an important aspect, and I think that's a simple way. It doesn't cost any money. Maybe some petrol money if you need to get out
Take some
there.
Water with you.
Put some boots on. put something on. Get a rucksack on if you want to go hiking. Go crazy, but just nice and gently. Yeah, take some water. Yeah. Yeah, definitely take some water. And, and if you're not fully qualified in mountain guiding, or maybe don't do the most extreme thing you've ever done the entire life first, be safe every step of the way. But it's just something to add on top of your pre-season fitness that I'd really recommend cricketers doing over time. Plus, you do it as part of a team bonding thing. Make an exercise,
Absolutely.
go
like
all
we said,
together
just great
if you
for
want
general
to, on a
health and
pre-season
well-being
expedition
as well.
whatever
So
it is.
that's
just
a
have
bonus.
some fun doing
James,
it.
thank you very much. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, it's good to have you guys on. Thanks for all the comments and reviews people have been leaving already. We really appreciate that. And in return, I have a present for you. If you go to cricketmatters.com, you can have the High Performance Handbook for free. It's a book I've written to help you train smarter and perform better.
There we go, cricketmatters.com. Grab your copy of the High Performance Handbook for Cricketers. Thank you, James. Thank you guys for listening. Until next time.